The following conversation is an excerpt from Skift's Travels Path Forward series on online travel. This took place on July 23, 2020. This conversation features Kayak and OpenTable CEO Steve Hafner. The moderator is Skift founding editor and executive editor Dennis Schaal.
Hey, Steve, thanks for joining us. Much appreciated.
It's my pleasure, Dennis.
So I remember going to a conference in around 2006, 2007. Kayak had been formed, I think, in 2004. And it was funny because you got up there and you said, Metasearch is a really lousy business to be in. The margins are so slow. It's a volume business. But, now everybody's in the tank. But how do you view Kayak and Metasearch coming out of this crisis? Is it more relevant, less relevant? What's your view of going forward?
Sure. I think Metasearch was very relevant then, and my remarks at that time were designed to scare off competition. Didn't work out very well, but we did okay nonetheless. Look, Metasearch has a very strong consumer value prop, right? It shows them all their travel options, helps them find the lowest price, if that's just interesting to them, or the highest service level, and then gives them choice on where to book, either supplier direct and or OTA. And I think what we've learned through this crisis is that the Metasearch model still is really important on all those dimensions, but it can do a lot more too. So as airlines implement different safety measures in terms of boarding and, is the middle seat open or not, if they have different cancellation policies, all those things in addition to just fares are really important. So Meta, we can quickly implement and show that information to consumers much faster than any individual airline, or certainly most OTAs who are pretty slow to move. The second thing the crisis taught us was booking direct can really help you out a lot of times. A lot of people who chose second tier OTAs kind of got stranded when it came time to try to get home early or break non-refundable policies.
Okay, so you mean booking direct on airline sites or on hotel sites?
Exactly.
Right.
Versus going through an intermediary.
Well, I was going to ask you because last week Skyscanner had some news. They started taking direct bookings from, I think, Aeroflot and WestJet. And I remember when Ctrip, now Trip.com, bought Skyscanner, there was a lot of speculation that they were going to turn Skyscanner into a booking site. But you've always been sort of down or kind of were skeptical about the game-changing aspect of direct bookings on Metasearch sites. So do you think it's folly for Skyscanner to go down this path at this time, or how do you view it?
I mean, I think what I've consistently said is I think the best outcome would be a hybrid OTA meta experience, which is, hey, we show you everything. We're agnostic about where you book. But if you want to stay within our experience, which a lot of people do, you can do that. And it's a frictionless path. You have a single account to manage. We can store your credit card, all that stuff, which is why Kayak many, many years ago debuted Book on Kayak. And what you were really doing is you were booking through our experience, but the actual reservation was being made on a third-party system, and any customer service was being provided by that third-party system. And I think that's still probably the right course of action, and that's why we stuck with it.
And how much are you into it now? Is this priority, or how much direct booking are you doing at this point for flights and hotels?
We're doing a lot of direct booking, but we've actually seen the number come down. So it's less than 10% of our transactions are direct booked on us within our experience. It's obviously a higher number on mobile than it is on desktop.
Right.
I think since the pandemic hit, we've seen a shift towards more supplier direct bookings than even from our own experience.
Right. There was a lot of talk, years ago about hybrid OTA Metasearch models, and, that would be the thing, but it doesn't really seem to have happened to a large extent.
Well, the reality is most consumers are very comfortable booking supplier direct. They just don't trust them as a destination site to show them everything.
Right.
You need to search somewhere else. And they're also comfortable booking at a big OTA. But again, they don't trust them to show them everything. So they need to go do their shopping somewhere, and that's on a Metasearch site. And then when they're ready to book, they go someplace they're very comfortable using.
Right. So what are you seeing now in terms of query volumes and domestic versus international on Kayak at this moment in time? What trends are you seeing? Or is there so little going on?
Well, sure. So it's pretty straightforward. We made our data set at Kayak available for anyone to take a look at the trends, but it varies a lot week by week. But there's three pretty straightforward trends. First is domestic is recovering more or less strongly than international, just because there aren't a whole heck of a lot of places Americans can go these days, particularly to Europe.
Right.
And even the places they go to, they have to self-quarantine for 14 days. The second is domestically, people are looking for shorter flights, nonstop flights nearby to non-crowded destinations where they can actually do stuff. So, depending on what's happening with COVID case counts and government restrictions, you can see Miami spike up or go down. You can see Las Vegas spike up or go down. And these are all trends that we're monitoring.
You can see the COVID cases spiking up and spiking down as well. So you talked about how things are changing week to week. So in April, you guys had to lay off or furlough about 400 people. But in June, I think I talked to you and you had started bringing people back, maybe 40 employees. You said mostly OpenTable. Has that continued? Because things have sort of, the demand has sort of worsened in the meantime. So what's going on there?
So we're bringing people back from furlough as our workload goes up. And obviously our workload goes up as restrictions loosen and travel demand of restaurants come back. So far, I think actually we've brought back a little over 50 people now, mostly on the restaurant side of the business because our restaurant customers are opening up, but quite a few on the Kayak commercial side too. So look, we're just like everyone else looking to see what happens week by week. And as our people get overwhelmed with work, which is what we want people to be overwhelmed with work, then we bring their colleagues back.
I see you started a road trips option, search option. Is that working out? I guess it's mostly really a hotel search, right? I mean, it's things to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, look, what we've always prided ourselves on at Kayak is product innovation. And if, historically we were a flight meta site and then we morphed into other verticals. There's not a whole lot of flying right now. People have a strong preference to drive someplace nearby. That's why we made our homepage rental cars, which I never thought was going to happen, but that's our homepage. And just providing them a rental car isn't enough. They want ideas. So we drafted and created this new product called Road Trips, which in a given travel radius shows you all the cool things you can do. And also shows you the price of accommodations and the price of a rental car to go see those places. Right. So I think we launched that like 2 weeks ago and it's getting good traction.
So Steve, you have, in addition to Kayak, I guess is mostly US based, but you also have Momondo and cheap flights in Europe and hotels combined in Asia. Are you seeing, those regions pick up more than you're seeing in the US, or how's it going over there?
Yeah, the trend is pretty clear, which is anytime case counts go down and governments reopen, travel demand goes up. So, in Europe, in Germany, and Denmark, and a few other countries, we're seeing travel demand come back. It's different, of course. It involves less international travel, more domestic. In Asia, for sure, we've seen travel demand rebound. And in some cases, it's actually running above where it was this time last year.
Steve, I saw in an interview you did about a month ago that Kayak was hit a lot harder than OpenTable because of all the cancellations. So how do cancellations impact Kayak's business if you're doing mostly referrals? Are you having to make good on some of those clicks that led to canceled bookings, or how did that work?
Sure. So the way the Kayak business was impacted differently than OpenTable is even though we had a dramatic reduction in our query volume in Kayak in terms of travel intent, some of our commercial relationships are on a cost per acquisition basis. Okay. So as consumers canceled, that took revenue away that we thought we had earned in prior periods from current periods. The other part that hurt us a bit was partners going bankrupt and then not paying open invoices for amounts and services that we had already provided to them.
What kind of partners were going bankrupt? Hotels, or was it a variety?
Less so on the supplier side, more second level OTAs, primarily in Europe.
Right, got it. Did you happen to catch on Friday night, TripAdvisor announced that they'd name Trip.com CEO Jane Sun to the board, and Trip.com had taken a 5% stake in TripAdvisor. What's the over-under on TripAdvisor getting acquired by Trip.com one of these days?
Look, I think there's a good industrial logic for TripAdvisor aligning forces with one or more OTAs. It would be kind of interesting to see them align with Trip.com, given that historically they were spun out of Expedia.
Right.
But look, in the travel business, there's always an ever-moving landscape of people doing business together and partnering and yet competing in other aspects. So I wasn't surprised to see a greater tie-up there. If there is an acquisition, hopefully it'll come at a higher price than what TripAdvisor is currently trading at, because I think the business is worth more.
Right. Wow. Vote of confidence in TripAdvisor there. So I noticed the other day that Expedia's homepage, it's at least the version I'm seeing, doesn't list hotels anymore. It just lists stays, instead of hotels and vacation rentals. What does that mean for Kayak's business? I mean, you've been trying to get more. You do have some apartments and vacation rentals. I know you've invited Brian Chesky to call you anytime he wants, if he wants to partner. But how does this whole metamorphosis impact Kayak?
Well, I think everybody in the travel space who offers hotels and is also starting to offer non-hotel accommodations is struggling with the right way to present those two choices to consumers, because they're very different products. And our sister company Booking.com actually calls their accommodation vertical now stays as well. So I think stays is the word that people are starting to lean towards, at least English-speaking websites. I wouldn't be surprised if Kayak adopts that standard pretty soon too. But at the same time, we also have a separate tab called vacation rentals, because some people just think of vacation rentals as being very different from even a non-hotel or hotel business, since that's usually entire properties. So we'll see what works. But like everything else, people will find a way to do it.
Speaking of Airbnb and Brian Chesky, are you buying Brian Chesky's argument that travel is forever changed, that it will be redistributed to apartments and vacation rentals in remote places and resort towns away from the big cities, or are we going to be back to fairly normal in a couple of years from now?
Forever is a long time, as my ex-wife used to tell me. So I don't think travel's forever changed. I think it's changed a lot in the near term, and we'll see how much of that sticks around and is durable. But I do think it's opened up consumers' eyes to off-beaten track accommodations, off-beaten track destinations, and we'll see how long that persists. And my challenge as the CEO of Kayak and of OpenTable as well is to make sure that we have products and services that resonate with our partners and with consumers that reflect the current shift in preferences. But forever, I don't know. Forever is a long time.
Totally. Coming out of the pandemic, coming into a recovery, in terms of, do you see companies like Google becoming even stronger in travel? I noticed, it seems most people think Booking Holdings will come out stronger than Expedia, for example. So how do you see things shaping up?
Generally, in terms of a crisis, the strong survive it, and in some areas they get even stronger. And then you get a whole raft of new upstarts and new thinking into a category too, right? So I think it's usually a kind of a barbell approach, and the folks that are in the middle are in a tough spot. And that's certainly what's been happening on the supplier side, particularly for struggling airlines, as well as for tier 2 OTAs. I'm less concerned about the strong getting stronger. I'm really interested in what new stuff is being worked on that resonates with consumers.
So speaking of working on, while we're in this phase that we're in now, has this, with demand not being as strong as everyone would like, has this been an opportunity for Kayak to work on certain things that maybe you didn't get a chance to work on before, or how have you been spending your time, Steve?
Absolutely. We had already defined 2020 as the year of the product internally. So, when we had to make those unfortunate headcount changes, that didn't really touch our product or tech functions. That was the lightest affected group. And what those people have been working on is furthering our long-term vision. So that's why, some things you've seen us launch in the last few weeks are 3 new verticals, right? Kayak at home, road trips, and kayak essentials, which is, internally we call it Metasearch for toilet paper. But anyway, it shows you like there's a lot of innovation going on, and soon we're going to announce our first forays into the hotel business. So keep your eyes out for that. Don't worry, we'll let you know about it, Dennis, in advance. But there's an awful lot of innovation happening right now because we're not distracted by the commercial part of the business of responding to tens of millions of queries per day.
So we're going to see some Kayak branded hotels?
I wouldn't be surprised if you did. Let's put it that way.
Huh. Interesting. That's intriguing. So, pre-pandemic, and even as recently as the first quarter earnings call, Booking Holdings has been talking about the connected trip, and Kayak had for a while was providing flight search for Booking Holdings. But in the meantime, Booking Holdings has, tourism activities, they've sort of outsourced to TUI and Musement. Where do you, is this kind of like do you think this is off the agenda for now for the parent company, or where do you think that stands?
Well, I think the vision for the parent company for Booking Holdings is to help everyone more easily experience the world. So I think we're very keen to have good product offerings in every vertical that helps people do that. The timing on which we do that under which brand, I think, is all subject to change and market conditions. But my job at Kayak is to make sure, from a meta point of view, that we're providing great services for consumers, and then internally within Booking Holdings, make those services available to our sister brands to use at their desired pace and speed.
Right.
And that's what we've done.
So part of the connected trip, and when Booking Holdings acquired OpenTable, there was it was seen as a bold move. I guess it was 2014. That there would be a synergy between dining and travel. And of course, everybody wants to go on vacation, and everybody's looking for great restaurants. But that synergy hasn't really played out as deeply as we might have imagined, right? I mean, you just mentioned that the various brands in Booking Holdings can, for example, put, a dining option as they wish, So is the synergy between dining and travel not as great as it was touted to be?
Well, look, every traveler has to eat, but the reality of the time, most people aren't traveling. So for your average restaurant, 97% of their business is going to be locals, right? Outside of some big tourist destinations like London and New York and Barcelona, for example. So we always knew that if the synergy was going to happen, it was going to happen in those big tourist destinations, and we're seeing positive indicators for that. So if Booking.com shows an OpenTable restaurant to their users, they'll get bookings out of it. But for OpenTable to succeed, it's not really about our integration with Booking.com. It's about getting restaurants to adopt our product, and then getting local residents to use it.
Right.
It's not about the dollars.
All right. Coming out of in the recovery, or coming out of the pandemic, do you think loyalty is going to play a larger role, or Booking.com has the Genius program, loyalty program, or do you think it's going to be more of a free for all, people looking for deals, and brand loyalty cast aside? How do you view that?
I think everyone's been wrestling with the loyalty question for years, and I don't think anyone's cracked it. I think the brand that's probably done the best job is actually Hotels.com. In terms of having loyalty propositions, is very straightforward. Book 10 times, get 1 night free.
Right.
So, I think all of our brands are looking at that across the travel industry, and you're going to see some more aggressive moves out of the players coming out of this, because nobody just wants to spend their money on Google.
Right. Kayak wouldn't launch any kind of a loyalty program, would you?
We've talked about it for a long, long time.
Really?
It's unclear to me how we actually, despite our intelligence, pull that caper off, because we don't have that many credit cards from users. We don't require logins. We don't have a lot of margin to play with because we're relatively low priced. So it's tough for me to get my head around, but that doesn't mean that we won't do it. We're looking at all kinds of things. OpenTable does have a very successful loyalty program. We have tied that into Kayak. So if you book on within our Kayak experience, you get OpenTable points, for example. But I think there's probably a lot more that could be done. But do I want to compete against American Airlines for loyalty points? Probably not.
So when I stay at a Kayak branded hotel, I'm not going to get loyalty points?
It depends. You might not get loyalty points, but you might get a welcome beverage in the OpenTable restaurant that's housed on site.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Steve, one last question. I saw that you guys had, for a while, you had a Black Lives Matter banner on Kayak. Was there thoughts about the downsides of getting too political, or you thought it was that important to do?
Well, we've always been very committed at Kayak and OpenTable to having a workforce that reflects the values of a diverse and inclusive community, and that reflects the communities that are global that we live and work in. So for us, it was I don't want to call it a no-brainer because that oversimplifies it, but we knew it was the right thing to do, and so we did it. And a month later, we, as we normally do, rotated that message over to supporting the Pride community. So
Right.
we'll continue to have messages like that where we think it's appropriate to do so in times of great social unrest. And I didn't see it, neither does anybody else at Kayak and OpenTable, as a political message. We're not politics at our companies. We're about opening people's eyes and having them travel around the world and for the betterment of themselves and their fellow citizens. So it's just the right thing to do.
Very much keeping with the promise of travel. So thanks, Steve. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks.